welcome. We are live on the PCS Grades weekly webinar. Today, we are talking about the 2022 moving season with moving industry experts from the International Association of Movers, IAM. I'm Lizanne Lightfoot. I'm the senior content editor at PCS Grades. I'm Marine Corps spouse, mom of 5 kids, and a published author. And my family has done both the traditional military moves and the PPM moves. So excited to talk about all of those options today. And this is my wonderful co-host.
Yay! I'm Tessa Robinson. I'm so excited to be back with everybody today and our 2 incredible experts who are going to introduce themselves in just a moment. I have lived kind of all over. I grew up an insurance brat, not quite the same as a military brat, but I did live in Guam and had several military moves. And I'm just excited to be here to talk to Chuck White and Dan Bradley. So before we get into the really tough questions, gentlemen, let's start with a softball. Chuck, please tell us about yourself.
Okay, sure. Again, Chuck White. I'm the president of the International Association of Movers. I have been in this job for 3 years, but I've been with the association, got to count back now, about 17 years. And before that, I was an actual mover. I worked at an agency, a moving company in the Washington, D.C. area. And IAM is in Alexandria, Virginia, right down the road, not far from good old Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So all those military folks, and that's where my dad retired from. So I am an Army brat. And so I get this lifestyle, I believe. As I was telling the group earlier, I'm an only child. So I felt like I did my time in service. My lieutenant colonel dad was a yes sir, no sir kind of guy. And we moved. I was in 8 different schools up to the time I got to high school. So I get it, listeners. I get it.
We are so excited to have you here and to bring us such a great perspective, really with empathy and compassion for the military community, since you've lived it, and to really rely on your expertise of what it was like to go from being a mover to now the president. Before we ask you some very, very serious questions, Chuck, Dan, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Dan Bradley. I'm the Director of Government and Military Relations at IAM. I was 20 years in the Air Force, married and dragged 4 kids around most of that time. Obviously, they came in spurts, but dragged them around from assignment to assignment like plenty of you. I did 8 years as a Department of the Army civilian after that. And then joined IAM about almost 4 years ago now. So my last assignment as a active duty officer in the Air Force was to be the DoD's Director of Personal Property and to run that program. And that's where I met Chuck, frankly, and as he engaged me on issues from the industry and the government's reaction to those. So I've been around, like I said, multiple PCSs. I think my oldest 2 daughters probably were in 9 schools or so. I don't know that I've ever really counted them all up. And so again, kind of understand where that is. I've never been a mover, but again, was on the government side for personal property in my last assignment, and try and bring some of that background to the process.
I blame Dan for any problem that's associated with any of the military household good moving programs. So I just point the finger at him, say it's his fault. It's all good.
And can I just say too, for just one thing, because on our name, the International Association of Movers, a lot of times people see that as, oh, these are just the guys who deal with international moves. But our association has members of domestic moving companies as well, U.S. companies. And, we engage with the government, with the DoD on behalf of our movers and engage our movers on behalf of the government on the domestic moving side as well as the international side. So not just a single moving process there.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that, because we are going to get into all the moving questions today. But I just want to give you guys a warm welcome back onto the webinar. If their faces look familiar, that's because I think they have been guests at least twice now, over the past few years. So this is their 3rd time here on the webinar, and we just value your experience and your perspective so much, because they're going to give us all the details on what to expect from this upcoming 2022 moving season. And I want to let you guys know you're getting some Army love in the comments. So those of you who are tuning in, please do let us know where you're coming from, which branch you're representing, and obviously all the questions that you have about this upcoming season and what you want to ask of the International Association of Movers. Because today we are giving away at the end of the webinar a $100 Home Depot gift card to a randomly selected winner. And the way that you are entered for that is just by asking your questions, sharing your comments, and engaging with us throughout this webinar. So please jump in and do that. And I know Tessa is excited to spin that wheel and give out the Home Depot gift card.
It is kind of my favorite part. It really is. It's the best.
But before we get to that, I do have one quick announcement from PCS Grades. I want to invite all of our viewers to come to a PCS planning party. This is a virtual event tomorrow. PCS Grades, as well as a bunch of other military nonprofits and organizations, are going to be hosting these virtual tables where you can ask questions about all aspects of PCSing. I'll be there representing OCONUS Moves. You can ask all types of moving industry questions and get ready for your next PCS. So we're going to be dropping a link in our comments for how you can attend that virtual PCS planning party tomorrow live. But with that, Tessa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. One of the things that we get asked frequently is during peak PCS season, is there an optimal time to move? We've heard that moving near the beginning of the month rather than the end may make a difference in terms of availability. Chuck, is this true? Why or why not?
Well, maybe. If you're moving in June or July, I'm not sure there is a real sweet spot to moving. As we all know, the paradigm is wait to get out of school and move and get into the new housing by the time school starts. So June, July, part of August is crazy time. Probably the middle of the month is maybe the best time within those crazy periods to move. Beginning and end of month, people are moving either into their new housing, starting new rental properties. Oh, good. Carl Weaver, one of my employees. Good job, Carl. I told you to be here, darn you. And the end of month is when leases end and everybody's trying to get out. So if there is a decent time in the middle of the peak moving season, then it's probably the middle 2 weeks in any month. But I would encourage folks, if you can get your orders and book a move outside of that peak season, early May, late April, end of August, into September, you have a much better opportunity to have the very best possible experience that you can. We are just overwhelmed during that peak moving season, trying to put 10 pounds of you-know-what in a 5-pound bag. And it's just a tough time period for all of us on either the industry side or on the military side. I don't know, Dan.
I would just say too that from a perspective is that it's not just the DoD who likes that summer move, right? It's right. Corporate movers, it's residentials. So you have all the different markets trying to get into that space for all the same kind of reasons. So it's not just DoD capacity that we're talking about here. We're talking about moving industry as a whole capacity, and that they all rub up against each other and impact driver availability, packing crew availability, warehouse availability, all of those kind of things.
Yeah, and I would say 2022 is going to be a really interesting period of time. I know we're going to probably get into that in our questioning, but coming out of the pandemic the last 2 years, you guys know this. You see it every time you do anything, and with inflation, with the availability of labor, the cost of labor, I know everybody's probably heard about this supply chain crisis that's going on. This is going to be a very, very, I'll use the word interesting. I'm not so sure interesting is maybe the right term to use. It's going to be a challenging peak season in 2022.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive into that. I mean, we all know about peak season coming, like you mentioned, between May and September, and obviously the biggest peak of that season being July and August. And I know when you guys have been on the webinar before, you talked about a lot of the changes that happened during the pandemic and some of the supply chain issues and all of the moving parts that affected the moving industry in one way or another. And I think as a lot of states are coming out of COVID restrictions and starting to lift some of those restrictions that were in place for the past 2 years, we're all wondering, how does that impact the moving industry? How is that going to impact this summer, and specifically for military families? And, is it going to make things any better, or is it going to get worse?
I'm going to let Dan take that one. That's all. He threw a fastball right down the middle there.
Tell us, Dan.
So I would say, there's a couple of pieces in there that I hear in your question. Maybe I got a little wrong, but what I hear, some of that is from a DoD perspective, coming out of COVID. Does that mean there will be less kind of like health protocols, as Transcon calls them, requirements, mask requirements, things like that, and will that have a positive impact? So we're kind of waiting on guidance from Transcom and the DoD on what's going to happen with things like health protection protocols that have been in place because of the pandemic for the last couple of years. They are things that, and we think there'll be some drawing back on some of that based on what's going on with the CDC and their guidance, and that maybe based on the area of the country that you're in, you might have eased up mask requirements and things like that. And does that help? It certainly helps from a labor perspective of trying to hire somebody who may or may not think that they got to wear a mask all summer long during the heat. And, people have been miserable in 100-degree heat, 90-degree heat, and the back of a truck is even hotter than that with their masks on. The broader question is, coming out of the pandemic, if we are coming out of it, let's hope, whether or not that's going to be helpful or it's going to have a positive impact on moving and capacity and those kinds of things. And I think, as Chuck kind of outlined already, it's going to be, we can be hopeful, but it's going to be difficult to see a huge positive swing to something that was different than last year. I think our experiences last year will probably in many ways be similar to this year in terms of the ability to find labor, to have the packing crews and those type of people available for you, the ability to make sure that we have enough drivers. Drivers in our industry, there are some who just do household goods, but there's a lot of shipments that get crated up and given to a freight company to haul across the country, and everybody wants freight drivers right now. So that, there's no real end in sight on that requirement right now in terms of having enough drivers to make everybody satisfied in terms of household goods. So I think there are impacts that will be still out there, even though we are hopefully easing ourselves out of a pandemic. There's still impacts to the availability of wood, and how does that impact a move? Well, a lot of your stuff gets crated and shipped that way, and so can we get our hands on wood and that type of packing material? There are sometimes weeks and weeks of wait for people to get movers to get their hands on those once they go in and order and reorder and prepping themselves for the peak season right now, doing some of that. So costs are high, inflation's high, fuel's high, wood prices are high, packing materials high. All of that has a constricting impact on capacity.
Bottom line, is it going to be better? I would say no, unfortunately. I think early planning, booking as early as possible, getting yourself on into your transportation office and getting your orders as quickly as possible and getting something on the books is the first step in the process, because there are a lot of behind the scenes things that are happening in terms of rule changes or amendments. And in our perspective, they may stand in the way of having the flexibility that moving companies need to be able to provide as much capacity as possible during the peak moving season. So maybe we'll talk about that later. I'll get on my soapbox.
I'm not gonna counter Chuck, but I'm gonna take a little different perspective on one thing, which is getting in early, I think, is absolutely true. But if people feel like that guarantees them, hey, I got my orders in March and my move is for June and I was first, so that should mean that I have that capability, sewn up by the movers, and I'll be good to go. But the reality is the logistics process can get tripped up along the way. Trucks break down, crews don't show up, people get COVID, all those kind of things. And right now in March, when I book my shipment, it's good to have that out there. It's good for the movers to understand what kind of capacity they're going to be dealing with in June. The earlier, the better. But the reality is that execution, I got to have the truck show up and the crew show up. And sometimes that truck got delayed. Sometimes that truck broke down. And what we hear from drivers now is, just like everybody else who's having trouble getting an electrician to their house or a plumber or something like that, getting your car in the garage isn't always easy, and a big truck is the same. So parts are taking longer, less maintenance because the labor is out there. So maybe I used to have, 5 maintenance guys on working this, and now I only have 3. All of those things have an impact that start backing up the logistics chain sometimes. And earlier you get in, is it better? Yes. But is it a guarantee because I was in first or early that it's all going to go smooth? Those impacts are still out there. And again, I was in a grocery store yesterday and there were empty shelves. I wanted some fruit that wasn't there. And those things are still happening across the country.
Absolutely. So I do want to, I've got 2 follow-up questions from the audience, from our viewers. And I'm going to share this with you. Since peak season is unavoidable for a lot of us, Jen asks, what can we do to make it go as smoothly as possible?
Well, again, we'll debate the topic, Dan and I. I think getting your shipment on people's books as early as possible is a key. As Dan said, it's not 100%. It doesn't guarantee that things will go perfectly, but it sure is better than trying to wait till the last minute and fingers crossed and hoping that I'm going to get moved. The other thing, and Dan and I talked about this quite a bit yesterday, I think there's responsibility on both sides of this question. And one of the things is military families being prepared for a move. I think a lot of the folks that are experienced and have moved multiple times and know what they need to do to get ready for a move. But having things organized, having things clean and ready, having things set in an area of the home that are not moving, so you can tell the movers, no, don't touch these. And well, I'm not a laissez-faire kind of guy. If somebody's coming into my home, I don't want to be breathing down their neck, but I also want to know what's going on. And you have a responsibility, and we have a responsibility to you to be able to communicate with you as the transferee, as the homeowner, to be able to tell you what's going on, so that it's not bad to ask questions. It's not bad to understand why people that are in your home are doing what they're doing and in the order that they're doing it, etc. So ask questions, be involved. Just don't walk out the door and turn a blind eye to what's going on. You be an active participant. And I think those things go a long way. Taking pictures of your goods, keep a good inventory, not just the inventory made up by the movers, but an inventory of yourself. And you know what I'm moving, what's in what room, making sure that all of the boxes are being labeled appropriately, all of these things. It works in tandem. We have, as movers, have responsibilities to you, but I think those that are most engaged on the front end of the move have the most success and have a better experience on the back end.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can I throw into engaged to me as well equals, tidy. As you can imagine, somebody coming into a house that's very cluttered. Where's everything going? Is it all clean? Am I trying to sort through somebody's dirty stuff to try and pack something up? And that has an impact on the other end too, right? Because things end up getting packed up that maybe you didn't want packed up, or maybe it got packed up in a condition that, is not going to be great by the time it arrives on the next location because it was dirty or whatever. So I think all of those things are impactful. And I'm going to reinforce what Chuck said earlier on the too late. the hardest thing to do on booking your stuff too late. A lot of times they're called short fuse shipments. People can't, they haven't had the opportunity maybe to get ahead, but those are hard in the middle of a peak season when somebody's trying to sort through their entire workload to find a mover who's going to take that movement short fuse, within a week or 10 days or less and try and sort through that. So that's definitely impactful. That's in a situation where the earlier, the better, I think, is important on that topic.
Absolutely.
So Dan's trying to play both sides of it. See, he was agreeing with me on the front end, but now he's like, oh, come on, Dan.
I have enough mental capacity to be able to see problems from both sides and how they can be mutually not exclusive, right?
I understand. Thank you, Dan.
Another follow-up question from the audience: given all of these challenges with peak season and supply chain and some of these issues, Inara asks, so are we better off doing DITY moves? And because of the COVID employment issues, are we seeing a full reimbursement for doing our own move? Is that something you can address?
I can. So customer satisfaction survey scores indicate that, again, we can get into the validity of those, we can get into the number of those, but the average scores right now show that plus 90% of the people that move with professional movers are satisfied or better with their moves. Again, if you are PFC Jones and you've got a small amount, that you're not a married guy, you don't have a family, maybe doing a move yourself is not necessarily, now called PPMs, personally procured moves. It's not a bad way to go. But if you're a family and you've got a household, 2-3 bedroom household worth of goods, I would encourage you to use a professional mover to handle that. The other thing that scares me about do-it-yourself kinds of moves is if you're going into the open marketplace and on the internet and trying to find a qualified, licensed, and insured mover, it's a dangerous place to be brutally honest. There are, and I don't call them movers. Some people say rogue movers. They're not movers, they're criminals. And we have come to find out through a number of interactions that we have within the government and at the state association level, that the FBI is actively involved now in looking at these groups as organized crime. And so their goal is to lowball you on the price, hoping you're going to get reimbursed and make the delta between that reimbursement. They're going to get your goods and they're going to hold them and make you pay 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more than they've told you it's going to cost, and maybe keep those goods and put them somewhere that you'll never find them. It's a tough environment. So is it an alternative, personally procured moves? It is. And I would just say, make sure you do your due diligence. Make sure that you know who these people are. I'd offer the International Association of Movers as a resource. If you have any questions about entities, we've got 2,200 member companies that we vet through our processes. And we have a publicly available website that's called Mobility Exchange. And you can be able to see who are what we call validated, vetted movers, and you'll be able to determine whether or not they're a member of our association. Is that the end all be all? It's not, but it's a first step. And then we're looking to increase that. We're going to raise the bar even higher, and we're going to make a consumer-facing website that is in a beta phase right now, and it will allow people to find truly the best of the best movers that are in the marketplace, and you can be assured that you're finding a reputable entity to be able to handle your PPM. So more to come on that. We'll come back to the show the next time and preview that for you.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more updates on that. Chuck, that is a lot of really useful information. And I want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. So you did talk about how families can kind of prevent some damages and things that they should do before the move to prepare. You talked about having your house just in basic, clean, and orderly manner. But we also were asking about the reimbursement for a PPM.
Sure.
And so last year, I know during COVID, temporarily, it was raised up to a 100% reimbursement. That's 100% of what the DoD would have paid for a military move for that particular family. Typically, it was at a 95% reimbursement rate. Do you know which one we can expect this year?
It is our understanding that it's going to be still at the 100%. I doubt very seriously that your viewers here are going to allow it to go back in the other direction. And as prices and inflation has escalated, there's no way in the world that that you should be asking military families to come out of pocket to do a move that they've been told they have to do. Yeah. So I don't think that there's any way, shape, or form that we're going back to the 95% reimbursement. It'll be at 100. And then for those that are in a very difficult situation, they had somehow a problem with their mover or something along those lines at the last minute, there's actual cost reimbursement that can occur. That means dollar for dollar, regardless of what you have to pay for the move, the government will reimburse you 100%. And that's not based on the cost that the government would have paid. That's your actual out-of-pocket expenses. So actual cost reimbursement is something that folks should ask their transportation office about if they get into that difficult situation where they've been dropped at the last minute or something negative happens and they have to find a move.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was a family that had to move during the pandemic. And I mentioned before, we are a large family. You can see we have a lot of books. We have a lot of things. And that 100% reimbursement was kind of the final convincing straw that, you know what, we're just going to have to do it ourselves. It's worthwhile. And so we did a PPM during the pandemic. It has.
Can I ask if you did it yourself? Did you go out and get a U-Haul and do that? Or did you find a company that is a commercial moving entity and hire them to do the move for you?
We did a hybrid. So my husband and I did 100% of the packing and actual furniture moving ourselves, but we did rent an ABF trailer that the trucking company parked in front of our house for a few days. We took our time loading the trailer, and then a professional driver picked it up and drove it to the location so that we didn't have to drive a U-Haul.
Got it.
So there was some out-of-pocket costs there, but for us, it was a good solution. I would say the downside of that PPM is that if you break your own stuff, which we did, there is a reimbursement process. So I just want to touch on that topic of claims. You know, if you use a professional moving company, there is a process for anything that they damage. You can go through claims. But I want military families to know on that front end, what can they be doing ahead of time, preparing for a move that would reduce the likelihood of having those claims at the end?
Well, I mean, if you feel comfortable packing some of your own things that are near and dear to you, but you want to allow the mover to move them on your behalf, you can do that. We used to call that PBOs, packed by owner boxes, but that doesn't come into play anymore. If the mover accepts, even if it's a previously packed box, if they accept it and move it on your behalf, they are liable for those goods. They do have the ability to, so if you do pack it, I wouldn't seal it completely. They do have to have the ability to check the goods, see how they're packed, see if what they've been told is in the box is actually what's in that box. But if you feel most comfortable with packing your own china or packing a few things that are near and dear to you, feel free to do that, because as long as you allow the inspection of those boxes, then they are covered by the what we call valuation.
Okay. Yeah, and Chuck mentioned it too, right? Pictures and things like that. I think, you know, a picture doesn't keep something from breaking, but having a sense in your house of where everything is, so where they should be based on the boxes when they come back the other side, so you don't kind of. I know there are things. I just moved myself a year ago, almost, or a little less than that, and I know there are things that I'm missing that are in this house someplace. That
I just want to know Dan moved himself. It was not a professional mover.
I cannot find those things because I didn't pay attention at the beginning of where I actually put them and with what. And it's annoying me now because I feel like I've gone through every square inch of my house and I can't find it. So, it's just that kind of awareness. And you mentioned it, Lizanne, from what we said before, things are tidy, things are neat, things are in their place. I don't know that there's a silver bullet there, but certainly the more organized, the better, I think, from a claims perspective. And then, being smart on how to handle it on the other end is important as well, right? On who you got to contact, staying engaged with that mover or their claim service, and, understanding DPS and its constraints. Frankly, they've just done a new, what they call a modernized claims module update in the Defense Personal Property System, the DPS system. And it's causing a lot of headaches, frankly, right now, that new change on the mover side, and we believe frustration on the customer side as well. So there are things, if you're going to be moving this summer, get into DPS and get those things looked at and figure them out so you can understand them. That's easy to say, hard to do, but I think that's important.
This thing right here, I mean, pretty much everybody's got a phone that has a camera on it.
Mm-hmm.
Take pictures of everything. I would encourage people, keep a log on your phone. You don't have to write everything down. You're going to get an inventory, but the conditions of your goods, where things are, where they're placed, etc. It's amazing what this little tool right here can do to be able to benefit you on the front end.
And then we talked about this recently too, and this thought process is fleeting out of my head. So I'm going to try and my pre-Alzheimer's kicking in right now, and I'm starting to lose the thought that I was just going to say. Getting with your mover, right? The crew member that comes in the house that you decide. And again, we talked about making sure you engage your crew members and those kind of things, to have a good move, but make sure you know who's the right person to contact. I moved many, many moons ago from Dover, and there was a whole crew of college kids that came in there and packed my stuff. They don't know the rules to DP3. I mean, that's just reality, right? Who is the crew chief? Who do you want to engage in? But then taking that person through your house and saying, hey, this is really important to me. And this stuff over here is really important to me. And, these have a lot of sentimental meaning, those kinds of things, I think, so that the mover's aware that, hey, let's take some special care with this because it has this meaning to me, I think is important as well from that perspective. Because again, in the summer, everybody's in a rush. Yes, they're trying to do a great job, an efficient job, but they also know they got another spot they're going to move on to tomorrow. So what is that? What are those things that you find a lot of value in that you want everybody to know? This is important to me. I think that's helpful for claims as well.
Absolutely. So another question about a change possibly for this summer. The new Global Household Goods Contract, GHC, was awarded a year ago and was originally supposed to be implemented this summer. Can you share any updates about this process?
Sure. There's probably an hour-long discussion on this because this is paradigm shifting for our industry. I will tell you, and it's going to have a significant impact on the way that business is conducted in our industry, and I think possibly for military families. But bottom line, we're moving from 900 plus transportation service providers. Those are 900 entities that have been vetted by U.S. Transcom and approved to operate in the Department of Defense's Household Good Program. They've decided, in their infinite wisdom, that they should go to what's known as a FAR contract, Federal Acquisition Regulation, which is a book that thick of rules and regulations. And through that acquisition process, they're giving it to one entity, the entire program. You hear all kinds of estimates, but I usually use the number of about 350,000 shipments annually. By far, many times the largest mover of goods, household goods in the world, period, is the Department of Defense. They're giving their entire program over to one contractor. The contract was awarded late last year, November timeframe, I believe. And it was awarded to a company that's a consortium called HomeSafe. HomeSafe bid against two other major bidders. HomeSafe won the contract. Both of those other bidders protested to the Government Accountability Office, GAO. And just about a little over a week ago, those protests, both of them were denied. That meant that the contract would move forward. So there is a 9-month in the contract transition period. And then at that point, the domestic program would be impacted by this new contract. That right now would look to be late 2022. But there are always outlets. And so it looks like the two entities that had their protest denied by the Government Accountability Office can now go to a second round of, in quotes, protests. They can take this to the Court of Federal Claims. It's obviously a federal court that will listen to and hear whether or not the award of the contract was done appropriately. So we believe that just maybe last night, the decision was made by one of the entities and they are going to the Court of Federal Claims. We believe the other one will as well. With that comes, again, we're in court and we'd say, no, we don't think it should move forward because of these reasons. But then there's another side to that, another piece to that, and that's whether or not they ask for a stay in the process. Meaning, when it goes to the Government Accountability Office, everything stops. And you can't move forward with the contracting until a decision is made. That's not true with the Court of Federal Claims. And so they'd have to ask for that stop in the process. And then, so the very first thing that we should be hearing in the next month or so is whether or not a stay is granted. If it's granted, again, all stops, nothing. Transition stops. But if not, then the transition continues to move forward under the assumption that HomeSafe, the current award winner, would continue. So will something happen this summer? No, it's not. Will, in terms of movement of household goods under the global household goods contract, at the earliest, I can see late 2022, but I think more likely it will be sometime in early 2023 that this will kick off, and we'll see what the success of this new program will be.
This whole thing sounds like a Netflix documentary.
We live, I don't know if anybody understood one word that I just said. But
I followed a lot of it, but that's because I've been following it for a couple of years with you guys.
Yeah. It's starting to come to the end, we think. This has been going on since the time we sat in General Lyons, the 4-star commander at U.S. Transcom, said, it's my belief we need to move in this direction. Dan and I kind of dropped our mouths wide open at that point. And it's been a series of stops and starts and awards and protests and on and on and on. But we're starting really, I think, to come to the end of this process. And I would just encourage your listeners and all military families to, obviously you're not going to be in the middle of it, but understand this is a significant paradigm shift. And for me, can it be successful? I think it can. But what scares me most is the transition. They haven't really laid out this major shift and how it's exactly going to work. An example. So let's say it starts at the beginning of 2023. They say that there's a 4-month roll-in period for this, where 25% of the domestic shipments happen in the first month. And then anything that's booked in the second month, we have 50%. And third month, 75%. And 4 months, we'll have the whole domestic program. 4 months. Well, where does it start? What orders indicate that they're going to move under one program versus another? Does it mean one base moves all under one program and another base under another? Does it mean that I'm on this corner and I'm moving under the old program, and I'm my next door neighbor and I'm moving under the new program? None of that has been spelled out right now. And that's what scares me to death, that everybody's going to be wondering, what program am I operating in? Who do I call? It worries me. That's all. So communications in this transition and how it's going to work is what people should be paying attention to.
All right. Well, I'm reassured to know that it's not quite kicking in this year, and we have some time to learn and to figure it out. But we'll definitely have to have you come back sometime next year to explain how that's going to impact our families, because I think people just want to know kind of on those broad strokes of, does this affect me having a moving coordinator, or does this affect the chain of phone calls that I need to make each time I move? But we are curious if there's going to be any policy changes that you're aware of, either this year from the DoD or in the future because of that GHC change. I will say we've heard some things about moving toward a more digital way of doing inventory and an electronic process for moves. Are you aware of anything on the policy level that would affect military families?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that, we've had significant changes over the last 3 years, I would say, that did have a lot of impacts that might have been hard to follow. Certainly, I will tell you they were hard to follow on the industry side, but maybe even impactful as far as understanding what the rules were in terms of being a customer and really understand that. I don't know that there's been huge ones this year on the customer side, still pretty big ones on the industry side that are impactful in different ways. The one though that I think that customers, service members need to understand is the 7-day spread. So they implemented a 7-day spread for picking up your household goods last year. And then they've altered it a little bit this year to try and take advantage of some lessons learned they feel in the system. So the 7-day spread now is going to be entered by the customer in DPS in the pick up no later than date field. So now used to be the first day was the first day of the spread, and then you had 7 days after that to pick up. They've flopped it on its head, and it's what the industry, the TSP will see is the last date that you can possibly move, and then 7 days before that is the spread this time. So it's totally reversed. And again, people struggled with that last year. It was a new concept for them, but you have to be available for all those days in the spread to be able to move, right? To have that mover come to your house and start the packing and pick up so that they can meet that 7-day spread. And it's not always exactly right when you want it, but that's what counseling is important on that, so that the member understands that. I think now in the system too, this time around, it'll say, okay, here's the last possible pickup date, and here's my preferred pickup date. So I think the industry, the TSP, the mover will see, okay, I gotta have it picked up by this date, but the member wants it on this date. And then, as they brief it right now, whether or not there'll be changes to that process on the 7-day spread, I guess remains to be seen. But as they brief it right now, no changes outside of that window that they're going to allow. And if there is a change, then it has to be initiated by the service member back to their counseling, back to the PIPO in the TMO office on their base. Last year, the mover could go in a conversation with the individual and make that update. So that could be impactful in that, those personal property shipping offices on the DoD side are very busy like everybody else in the middle of the summer, and trying to make a change to something that already exists in the system can be fraught with disaster a lot of time and energy and effort. So that's, I think, looking through the ones that I've looked through, that's kind of the biggest change that you should understand. The other rules from previous years mostly still apply in a lot of situations on the customer side more so. There were changes on the industry side that were impactful, but I think they're transparent, frankly, to the customer. And then you mentioned electronic inventories. and the GHC, the Global Household Goods Contract, will bring in that's a concept and a methodology that I think the winning bidder will use is an electronic inventory. But even prior to that, the DoD has told movers that they have every intent by May of 2023 of implementing it, regardless of where the GHC is at that point. So that's a pretty large, sizable shift, regardless of whether it's under contract or under the current program, for movers, drivers, everybody in the process to kind of transition to an electronic inventory. I think it is a good process, but you gotta be able to do it. You gotta have people pick it up and start working it and using it. So I think that'll be a positive for the customer when it's an electronic inventory. It's just it's a seismic shift in the industry, but frankly, it probably needs to happen. So,
Dan, can you elaborate a little bit more on the electronic inventory? Tough word to say, apparently. What will the role for the end user be in that? Will they have to log things in themselves? Will it just be simply to track where their shipments are? Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, so the electronic inventory will be really software that, instead of having your inventory scribbled on an inventory sheet, will have to be done electronically, right? So that'll be, computer-based writing on there, as opposed to somebody scribbling it and you don't know what it says anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And it's going to have condition codes that you can read and understand. So you're trying to, you see on your little inventory, a lot of times it'll be like 1, 3, 5, what does that say? What's this condition code? It'll be all spelled out. So it's the same inventory. It's kind of the same process. It's just electronic now, not somebody writing it. So the impact for you as a customer will be, I'm done with my inventory. You still gotta electronically sign each of those inventory sheets, just like you do right now with a handwritten one, and then should be able to leave you a electronic copy of the inventory when the mover walks out the door, right? Or soon thereafter if you're having internet problems. But you get emailed that probably in a PDF, and you'll have that in kind of plain language inventory that's not handwritten anymore, and you can take that with you, and then that gets passed along to the other end as well. So when you're getting it checked off on the other end, it might be electronic, but it could be on a piece of paper. But it'll be not somebody's handwritten notes. It'll be electronic that way.
Well, and Chuck for the win again. Chuck coming in strong with the website for us. I don't know if you saw that.
That wasn't me. Yeah, Carl is our web manager, and so yeah, he's going to come with links for you. Yeah, we have a lot of links, I think, and areas in our couple of websites that I think could be useful for your members. So I'll ask Carl to put in both links to what we call Mobility Exchange, which is our directory per se, but it's got a lot more information than just who our members are. And then our general website. I thank you, Carl. I won't forget. This guy. And so, we have our normal iamovers.org website that's got a lot of information about the association, but we do a lot of topical stuff. One of the things that we've just done in the last, really, we did the first one toward the end of 2020. We started getting information from our members about problems that were happening in the worldwide supply chain. Backups at ports, delays, all of these kinds of things. And it was really just starting to raise awareness within the world community. And so we did a white paper and a short video outlining exactly how this came into being in this COVID environment. We updated it in April of 2021. And we've just come out with the newest version here, and just in the last few weeks, updating. And we're not calling it our supply chain problem, but this is supply chain disruptions and what these disruptions mean, not just in the moving industry, but for all of us in the United States and the world. And I'll pat ourselves on the back, and we've got a contractor that works with us that I think we do a pretty good job with this, laying it out, giving some ideas and some reasons as to why these things are happening and what those impacts are. Interestingly enough, this latest one was inspired by by one of our transportation offices that we deal with. And they were saying that they were giving this out to military families that were moving to give them, it's a short video, 7-8 minutes, to give them a general idea as to what's happening and why they are being impacted by these supply chain disruptions, and what it can mean for them in their shipments and any potential delays. And they said, we did this last year. It was helpful to allow people to understand what was going on. And so we've updated it. We've shared it with them. I think that you'll be able to either access it on our website, and or you'll be able to, I think, see some of the DoD folks at the transportation offices providing this to give you a kind of a 20, 30,000 foot level view of what's going on in the world and how you may be impacted in multiple ways by these supply chain disruptions.
Can I tie what Chuck just said to a question, Lizanne, you asked me about upcoming rules changes that might be impactful, and one that I swung and missed on. I didn't think of it until Chuck just talked about that. And that is that the DoD is updating their transit times, right? So, nobody was making normal transit times in any market, as Chuck said. This is not just about moving. It's about putting any type of cargo, freight, whatever, on a ship, on a plane, on a truck, and struggling to get something from A to B in a timely fashion. We've asked for changes to the DoD transit times on how long, if you're going from New York to Germany or whatever it might be, right, in your PCS, there was a certain amount of transit time that the mover had to get that from pickup to delivery on the other end. And the DoD, we asked them to take a look. We provided some data for them and some input over the last couple of years on what we thought were problematic transit times, even before the pandemic and COVID, but certainly in the middle of it, that ships weren't sailing like they were sailing before. There weren't as many U.S. flag ships, which we have to put household goods on. They were taking longer. Crews were getting COVID and shipment lanes were being shut down, distribution out of ports, all kinds of things were happening. Rail problems in the U.S., freight problems in the U.S. And so they finally did a pretty large look at that. They're not the only ones. The General Services Administration, GSA, did that as well on the other federal agency side, and they updated transit time. So, movers have a little bit longer now to get something from A to B because it just wasn't realistic on the times that were there, and people were being penalized, suspended, all these things for things that were just frankly 100% out of their hands. And the other thing I would say that people get nervous about, just because it might take now 2 extra weeks longer or something for something to get in place, doesn't mean somebody's going to hold on to it for 2 extra weeks, right? It's all about what is a reasonable time frame to get something from A to B. And if the mover can still get it there in a shorter period of time, that's what they're going to do. But try to sew a little bit of realism into what was going on with this supply chain disruption and COVID to try and have those transit times adjusted. And DoD did that. And I think largely speaking, the industry is appreciative of that and agrees with some of the changes they made. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously it's not fun when you have to wait those extra couple of weeks to receive your goods. I've done an international move, and I know that being in a hotel and being in temporary housing without anything is difficult. But I'd rather hear a real number from the beginning so that I can plan for that event and plan how I'm going to take care of my family in that situation, rather than being told an unrealistic date and then have it continually pushed back for weeks. So we do appreciate the transparency. And that's a big part of what we do here is we want to inform our viewers. We're not here to give them, unrealistic, rosy results. PCSing is hard, and we all know that, but we want to provide the facts and get it straight from the industry experts. So we appreciate that.
Super.
And in addition to giving and managing expectations, we're giving away $100 gift card. So I think it's about that time, Lizanne. I'm going to go ahead and get the wheel of names all spun up and ready to go to give one of our lucky audience members a $100 gift card to Home Depot. Thank you to our fantastic sponsor.
Hey, Dan, did you get on that list? Or are you going to be on the wheel?
I asked a couple of questions in the chat, so I think I'm in.
I was just debating internally with myself of whether or not I should leave Carl on there. What's your thought? What do you think, Chuck? Should we take him off or leave him on?
Get him off of there.
That's what I did. Sorry, Carl.
PCSing.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And while I get that teed up, Lizanne, why don't you tell our fabulous viewers about what we can expect next week?
Yes, we are going to be back here next week, same time, same place. We definitely want you guys to tune in. We're going to be talking about preparing to sell your home. So we have a real estate agent who's coming to share all of the tips and the info about staging your home, getting ready for that selling process. So if you are buying or selling this year, then definitely tune in to ask the real estate agent all of your questions and concerns.
All right, wonderful. And here we go. It's my favorite part. I feel like Oprah every week.
One for
Thank
you.
to the Home Depot for sponsoring this giveaway.
And it is Anara Farina. Please, Anara, go ahead and message the page so we can find out how to get you your $100 gift card. And thank you. Oh, look, she already said thank you. She's so excited.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you all for coming. We'll be back next week, but we cannot thank Chuck and Dan enough for being here and for sharing your expertise with us. It really is second to none. We're so grateful for you taking so much time out of your day today to be with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Until next time, this too shall PCS.
Thanks, everybody.